I mean, for me, one of the main points is that I try to be as counterintuitive as I can sometimes, because, or to just go against the grain of culture or of the conventional wisdom about certain things. So, for example, pornography. People just don't want to accept or believe that pornography could be tender, or that pornography could be romantic, or that pornography could be more than just the documentation of the sex act. You know, it can be political. It can, it could be many things, and still have the signifiers of pornography. I mean, without betraying it. So people would say about my first 3 films, No Risk Enough, Mass, Super 8.5, and Hustler White, some people would just think it's pornography because it's sexually explicit, or because it depicts extreme fetishes. And I wouldn't discourage them from thinking that, because I don't mind people think I'm a pornographer, and I express solidarity with pornographers. And I know that pornography is a vast kind of mode of expression that has all different kinds of incarnations. So I happen to make films that are sexually explicit, that are romantic, that are queer, and for me that's not a contradiction. Then later on, almost as a provocation, I started making directly pornographic films using the conventions of pornography, working with porn actors and porn producers, kind of within the porn industry, which I never intended to do. But because I was labeled as a pornographer, I decided to fulfill the prophecy, And then my films, I think, shifted, because my work became partly an investigation of what the conventions of pornography are and how to subvert them. So I would make a movie like The Raspberry Reich, which is a agitprop political satire of the extreme left. And yet I used porn actors and I made a softcore version and a hardcore version, and had long scenes of explicit sex, fucking, with political commentary running over it, or text, political text running over it. So the idea for me was always to engage the sexual drive and the intellect at the same time as an experiment, and see where that takes the audience. Some people reject it completely. They can only see it on an intellectual level, and they ignore the pornographic. Other people, it's the opposite. They just get into it as porn, and they ignore all the political stuff. And then there are those who have always, come up to me and said, thank you for engaging both at the same time. It's kind of like a rare thing to see in cinema. So, that's something important to me. The idea of the fetish is very, very strong in all my films, and for me, I think the fetish the idea of fetish is something that's mostly reviled in culture. People are kind of disgusted by the idea of fetish, or they think it's nasty, or they think it's perverted or sick. For me, a fetish is a reverence for a certain object. It's an appreciation. It's a worship of something. So there's something very romantic about it. To take an example of foot fetishists, it's not that they want. There's different kinds of fetishes too. Some people want to defile the foot. They want to degrade it. Others, for the others, it's like the most ultimate. It's the ultimate object of their desire, so they worship it, they revere it, like almost like in a religious way, So it's much more complicated than just being something that you can dismiss, and everyone has some kind of fetish. And of course, Freud's definition of fetish is anything in a sexual act that isn't anything that doesn't that that doesn't go towards the act of copulation itself, of intercourse. Anything that is extraneous from intercourse is a fetish. So, for example, kissing. A kiss is a kind of fetish because it doesn't contribute, because you can procreate without kissing. You can't procreate without fucking, but you can procreate without kissing. So it's kind of an extraneous kind of sexual act that is considered a fetish. So when you start with that definition, really, it opens up the definition to everything, being every sexual act being a kind of fetish outside of strict heterosexual intercourse. And also in general, people look down their noses at the idea of fetish, and they also look down their noses at and kind of are very dismissive of pornographers, even though so many people watch pornography and incorporate pornography into their lives. They don't want to, when they actually meet a pornographer or someone who stars in a porn movie, they're very condescending to them, or they're very kind of moralistic towards them, which is a kind of hypocrisy that I've always fought against. I think everyone should have a philosophy of homosexuality because, I believe in Freud's theory of constitutional bisexuality. I believe everyone is born with a certain amount of bisexual potential. So homosexuality isn't something out there like as the other. It's actually something that everyone has potential to at least imagine or if not directly experience. So, but having said that, in terms of the gay movement, I really see it as a political movement still, and I think it always will be, because for me, homosexuality is something that goes against the grain of nature, and the whole movement to normalize it for me is a kind of betrayal of what homosexuality represents. It really is a kind of defiance against nature. I mean, the biological imperative is procreation, and homosexuality really in its essence goes against that. So, which is not to say that obviously homosexuals have children, and that's a kind of a separate issue. It's the very idea though of I always follow Camille Paglia in that regard. She says, not everyone has the stomach for a daily struggle against nature, because it does go against nature in that way, which is not to demean it, or for me that's something that makes it more significant, more special, and it also for me is something that is for me it represents a kind of an outsiderness. It gives you the opportunity to, because of its struggle against normalcy, it gives you the opportunity to be outside of the status quo, outside of the conventions of the sexual conventions of society, and allows you a certain distance from it to kind of observe how things are, or to think about different social and sexual configurations that are not part of the dominant ideology. So, for me, homosexuality is an expression of difference, and if you try to normalize it, or tame it, or domesticate it, or make it normal, it really takes away its power.
Lullaby and good night. In the sky, stars are bright. May the moon's silvery beams bring you sweet dreams. Close your eyes now and rest. May these hours be blessed till the skies are mine.